Dragon Ball is a series that's filled with lore, deeper meanings, an incredible amount of culture, and can sometimes be even deeper than an adult film star. Okay, maybe not that deep. But despite all of that, the majority of us as little kids got into this franchise because of the cool characters and cool fights and really the Chad aspect, to borrow someone else's word, of the series, which is loaded with all kinds of amazing fights, and not just amazing fights, but also amazing characters doing amazing things. And I want to discuss those amazing things here on this video as I present my top 10 greatest Dragon Ball techniques from Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball GT, Dragon Ball Super, and everything in between. And keep in mind, this is my personal top 10 favorite techniques. If your list is different, I would love to hear what your favorite techniques are in the history of Dragon Ball. And also keep in mind that this is not based on strength or necessarily how useful a technique is. It's more so what I think is just freaking cool and an all-around perspective, all-around opinion on my top 10 favorite moves and techniques in the series. It's next.
Hey, this is Master Roshi from Dragon Ball Z. You're listening and watching Geekdom 101. And if you haven't already subscribed, then look at these links and do so.
I want to remind you once again, this is just my opinion of what I think are the 10 coolest techniques in the series. Let's begin with number 10, the Taio-Ken, otherwise known as the Solar Flare. The ability to blind your opponent and stun them for a few moments is incredibly useful both in the real world as well as in Dragon Ball, and these characters often pull this out as a trump card to shock and stun someone to either escape a fight or to get the upper hand during battle. I love this technique because of how useful it is and that it's not really an offensive technique. It's actually a very intelligent defensive technique that can be used by anybody and stun anyone. So even when you're being outmatched by your opponent, even if you're fighting someone who's stronger than you, a Taio-Ken is sure to give you at least a little bit of breathing room to either escape or to land a deadly blow. And I also love that whenever a character does the technique, you always hear them say it with such, incredible energy in their voices, and it sounds freaking cool. And I know for some it sounds a little bit too much like Kaioken, but remember, the Taio-Ken, the Solar Flare, actually came first. So remember that one. Number 9 on the list is the fusion pose. Everybody loves fusion. That's one thing that I've noticed about Dragon Ball fans is it's pretty much universally accepted that fusion is a cool idea. And even though Potara fusion is artifact based, the fusion pose may look ridiculous and it's a dumb little dance invented by the Metamorans, but the idea behind fusion is such a cool concept. Toriyama, during the Buu arc, was kind of thinking about how to give characters new kinds of power-ups, and Toriyama revealed in Dragon Ball Guidebook Daizenshu 6 that manga writer Masakazu Katsuda actually gave him the idea to say, hey, why don't you take two characters and combine them together? And that's how we got Gotenks, Vegito, and the other fusions in Dragon Ball. Of course, prior to that was the Namekian fusion, which is more like an assimilation. This is more so later on in the series when he realized, I can't figure out how to make Super Saiyan stronger than it already is, except for doing the different versions of it and the upgrades to it. And that's how fusion became a thing. And of course, Toriyama, trolling his friend Katsuda Sensei, would tell him, hey, this is a good idea. It's the first time you've said anything useful. Of course, Toriyama loves to screw around with his friends, but hey, fusion's awesome. We all can agree to that. No matter what version it is, it's awesome. And pose is the one that's actually a technique versus an artifact, so that's why it's on the list. Moving on to number 8, Piccolo, I think, is one character that has created some of the coolest techniques and done some of the coolest feats in all of Dragon Ball. And I don't think he gets as much love as I think he deserves for this. But my personal favorite technique that Piccolo's ever done, again, my personal favorite, has several names. Makuhoidan, Kakusan Yodo Kikoa, otherwise known as the Demonic Air Besieging Bullet, or, to most fans, Hellzone Grenade. I love the fact that he throws these key balls, and as you're fighting Piccolo, you are unsuspectingly thinking that he's missing you, not realizing that he's purposely missing you to gather the ki energy around you to eventually have it cluster around your body and attack you at full force. The first time we ever saw this move was in the incredibly underrated but incredible fight between Piccolo and 17 in Dragon Ball Z. And ever since I saw the move, I just totally loved it. It's my favorite Piccolo technique, and I wish he would use it more often. Maybe we'll see him use it in the future, hopefully so. Moving on to number 7 is the Super Ghost Kamikaze Attack. Now, much like the Hellzone Grenade, this was not a move that really killed the opponent, but I can tell you one thing, it certainly was meant to. Gotenks always came up with some pretty cool and wacky techniques, the volleyball, of course, being the other one, but the Super Ghost Kamikaze Attack is such a cool move. Think about what Toriyama must have been smoking when he came up with this. You spit out a ghost resembling clone of you that upon contact explodes. Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous. And then later on, the technique evolved to where Gotenks could spit out multiple ones, and then Majin Buu took it to the next level where his version of it actually fired energy. So Super Ghost Kamikaze Attack has always been my favorite technique of the Buu saga that Toriyama introduced during that arc, and that's why it's number 7 on this list. Now, speaking of the Buu saga, number 6 on the list is from the Buu saga. Now, you might be wondering, where's the special beam cannon? Where's Frieza's death beam? Well, I put the human extinction attack at number 6 because it pretty much does what those techniques do, except on a planetary level. Super Buu lifts his hand up, and he's just standing there, calm, collected, and then fires literally millions of ki blasts that fire down upon the surface of the earth and wipe out civilization as we know it, with the exception of a very small number of survivors. This is the steroids version of the special beam cannon and of the death beam, because he wiped out a planet without even destroying the entire thing, without even breaking a sweat. If you're watching Dragon Ball Z for the first time and you see this, it's stunning and shocking, and I love the move so much. Now, speaking of eliminating and wiping things out, number 5 really needs no introduction. The Hakai. This is our first entry on the list from Dragon Ball Super. Not just because of how awesome the technique is, how it can just wipe you away from existence, not even send you to hell, literally erase you from existence, but just the fact that the vocal performances from the Beerus voice actors, both in the United States and in Japan, and in the Spanish version, are all freaking cool. Hakai. Like, the way he says it is so epic, and it's just, what a great technique, what an effective technique, and it's the most scary technique we've ever seen Beerus do. I don't really like the Topo version that much. It seems to be a watered down version. The original God of Destruction true version of this move is number 5 on the list. Number 4, of course, a classic, the Genki Dama. Now, I will be honest with you about the Spirit Bomb. It does kind of get long in the tooth if you're watching early Dragon Ball Z, because Dragon Ball Z movies 2, 3, and 4 use the Spirit Bomb to finish off their opponents, and then Goku would use it again in movie 7, and it was all weird. But at the end of the day, it's still a beautiful concept. The Genki Dama gathers health energy from all beings, or at least surrounding beings, and formulates it into a ball that punishes you if it hurts. And yes, the Spirit Bomb only killed a handful of people in the movies and didn't really kill Vegeta or Frieza, but it did help eliminate both Majin Buu and the final Shadow Dragon in GT, so that does deserve some credit for that. But either way, the idea behind it, although it takes a long time to power up, and it does get long in the tooth, it's still one of my favorite techniques, and you know when Goku busted out that it is his trump card. Like, now you know that he wants to finish this fight. That's the move. Now, number 3 on the list is a classic. Really, it's the classic, the most iconic move in all of Dragon Ball, the Kamehameha. And I'm talking about all the Kamehamehas, whether it be Goku's very first one in Dragon Ball when he did it to the car, the foot Kamehameha, Master Roshi's, the father-son Kamehameha, or even the variations of it like Vegeta's Gallic Gun, which is not the Kamehameha, but it's very similar. I love the Kamehameha. It's a classic pose, it's a classic technique, and it is the technique of Dragon Ball. More characters know this move than pretty much any other attack-based technique, and it's just, it is Dragon Ball. Like, when you think about Goku, the next thing you think about most of the time is the Kamehameha, because it's the move. And we've seen so many great moments with different versions of the Kamehameha, so it has to be high up on the list, and it's always going to be a classic. And when I was a kid, before I knew any better, I actually thought that Dragon Ball had copied this from Street Fighter, from the Hadouken, but it turns out that Dragon Ball actually came first. So it's the other way around. Love the Kamehameha. Number 2, and you'll be surprised at this high on the list, is the Tokitobashi, the time skip from Hit. Now, I thought about whether to put time reversal on here or, of course, time freeze from the Ginyu Force's Mr. Guldo, but I decided the time skip would be the best one because this is one of the coolest concepts that Toriyama ever introduced into Dragon Ball Super. Hit's ability to create these pocket universes where time does not exist and is able to switch between them at such speed that we've never seen before is still one of the coolest things we've ever seen. And again, it's not the most powerful move because we've actually seen Goku overcome this move. Same thing with Jiren, and it's not the strongest, but just the concept behind it is so radically above anything else we've seen in Dragon Ball prior to it. Like, it really makes you think, and it's on some like Marvel cosmic kind of theology, you know, and I love that about the technique, and that's why it's so high on the list, and I wish that we would see more of it, a more advanced version of it, and I hope we do in the future. Number 1, my absolute favorite technique in Dragon Ball is Shunkan Ido, the instantaneous movement. I don't want to call it instant transmission because that's a very bad translation. I'm not really sure why they went with that in the original English dub, but it kind of stuck, so you know the move. The ability to teleport is probably the coolest thing, not just because of how useful it is in battle, but because of how useful it is in the series, because we see Goku use this move to get from point A to point B in rapid succession. And to be honest with you, if you were to ask me, what would be the one technique from Dragon Ball that you would love to have in the real world, it would actually not be flying, even though that would be my number 2. It would be instantaneous movement. Because think about how much easier life would be if you could just teleport somewhere. If you have a friend who you met online and they live far away, you can teleport to their house. If they're having a bad day, make them feel better. If you want to go to the grocery store, you can teleport and teleport home, grab all your stuff. Of course, with great power comes great responsibility, and I'm sure some people would use it to rob banks and things like that, you know, which I would never do, but some people would do that. Either way, imagine being able to do this for real. That would be cool, and that's why it's number 1. And it's my favorite technique, and it also is a technique that gives Goku the edge in battle. Even if someone is stronger than him, this move can mean victory for him if used properly. So those are my top 10 favorite Dragon Ball techniques. Tell me what your top 10 favorites are. I know some of you are surprised that I didn't put Burning Attack, Spirit Sword, Final Flash. I love all of those moves, especially with the performances from the voice actors and the animation when we see those moves. But these are just my top 10 personal favorite, coolest moves in the series. Don't forget to tell me your list down below. I'm very curious to hear what you chose and why. And I thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I love you all. I'll see you soon.